Back in the courtroom today, charged with first-degree murder and 5 additional counts in the shooting death of a 31-year-old mother in Chicago's South Loop. Her attorney wants her out while the case is moving forward.
Tia has been following this closely from the start. We heard from the man who has a child with both women, and he was there when this happened.
Yeah, he was there when the shooting happened, and he was there in court today, and he had a lot to say to us after court ended. Carlos Smith, we interviewed him before. He's at the center of a case that has devastated 2 families. Today, a judge heard arguments over whether the woman accused of pulling the trigger should remain behind bars and ultimately made a decision. Smith shares a child with Romeca Blackmon, the 31-year-old mother who was shot and killed, and with Quadajah Johnson, the woman now charged in Blackmon's death. Prosecutors say Johnson shot Blackmon during a confrontation in Chicago's South Loop on September 8th last year. Johnson, who was licensed to carry a firearm, has claimed that she feared for her life. In court today, Johnson's attorney argued for her release, but documents show that motion was denied. The defense outlined evidence they say contradicts the state's version of events, including 911 audio recordings and surveillance video. The defense also challenged the credibility of the state's key witness. We also heard again from Smith, who disputed claims made by prosecutors, including allegations that he fist bumped Johnson after the shooting and physically assaulted the victim seconds before she was killed.
I'm just tired of the lies and everything, what they said I did. I know for a fact it wasn't true. I didn't headlock her. I didn't beat her with the door. I only try to diffuse the situation. They keep deflecting away from that. And what I did what they saying I did made it sound harsh, and I didn't do that. So we need justice. We need justice to be served too, the truth. And they keep deflecting from it.
Well, let's start off with this. So we found out just going through this case, someone had posted to me on Facebook saying there are additional charges. So we wanted to look and see, was that indeed true? And we found out that on December 30th that there was an indictment that came back for 5 additional charges for Quadajah, obviously murder still being the highest charge. But when we looked at what was filed just 2 days ago, so filed on Monday by her attorney, we're actually learning a whole lot more. We're learning more about the case. We're learning more about her. And some of this stuff is a bit shocking, to be honest. One being that according to Quadajah's attorney, Ari Williams, is that the key witness for the state, according to them at least, going through these 20 pages, had on noise canceling headphones. So the question is, did that person hear what they said that they heard? And then there's some conflicting statements based on other witnesses that were on that scene. That's one thing that we learned. Look, I had to break all of this down because it's so much information. They're basically saying here that there is not clear and convincing evidence that Quadajah Johnson murdered Romeca Blackmon with intent, intentionally here, and that they feel like she is not a threat and should be released either on home confinement or electronic monitoring. Also very interesting detail that came out of this was seeing that there is no video that shows the full picture of this killing.
And there were a lot of people out there.
There were a lot of people out there. There's cameras out there. We know there was a CTA bus that caught something, but apparently no actual video of this entire, killing. Again, her attorney is really saying, look, this was an act of self-defense. This is why. Saying that Romeca had threatened Johnson. No, they had not seen each other before, but that she had made threats to her through family, including calling her grandmother and saying that she was going to kill her. So there's a lot of things that have come out of this, including that order of protection. Remember, we saw on our end that it was not served. According to them, they're saying that the order was actually granted on July of 2025, months before the shooting, and the victim was served and aware of that order. So there's a lot of things that have come out of this that I don't think we really had a clear picture of.
At least we're hearing the other side.
The other side. And I think it's important, to show the other side, because as of right now, we did request an interview with Quadajah Johnson. We submitted that back in December of last year, and we never heard anything back. I actually did call up the attorney today just to see, was there an opportunity for that to happen? let's just say she made it very clear that they will not be talking anytime soon. I'll leave it at that. But we have tried to get the other side of this. Obviously, we heard from Carlos, who was there, who is a survivor, a person who lived to tell the story. And we can't talk to Romeca because she's not here. And so we haven't been afforded the opportunity to talk to Quadajah about what happened. But they're saying that 4 minutes after Romeca dropped off her son at school, that she was driving in the opposite direction of Quadajah and Carlos. Quadajah was going back to her car, which was parked nearby, because she had spent time at Carlos's home. And according to them, Romeca then makes a U-turn in the middle of the street, and that is where you see her car double park. And according to them, this is the exact quote from them, and it will be in my report this evening, that when Romeca approached them, she yelled, "I told y'all I was going to catch you." And so for Johnson, because her 6-month-old at the time was in the car, according to her lawyer, is saying that was enough. The previous threats, the demeanor of making the U-turn,
The protective order,
and what was said out there that day was enough for Johnson to fire her legal, rightful owned firearm. So yes, we are hearing from the other side. And again, that's our job to tell all the sides. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's where we are with this.
And maybe, I mean, we mentioned from the outset here that a lot of people have been following this story.
Yeah.
But let's just assume, we have some people who are saying, who is Quadajah Holly Johnson?
Yeah, there may be.
Who is Romeca Blackmon? And what is their connection? What happened?
So let's walk back through it. So what we know is that I shouldn't say earlier this year, because it was last year. Last year, we'll walk through who the players are here. So Quadajah Holly Johnson and Romeca Blackmon are 2 women. They both have children by the same man. His name is Carlos Smith. He did an interview with us. When this situation happened last year, Quadajah Holly Johnson is saying that she felt that she had to defend herself from Romeca Blackmon because they had an ongoing feud in which they had never seen each other until the day of this shooting. Romeca is shot literally like not even full blocks away from her son's school after dropping him off. She dies. And so the question now is this is what people have been asking, when is it okay for you to act in self-defense? When is it okay for you to pull your lawful firearm and shoot someone, considering that Romeca Blackmon did not have a gun? It was verbal threats. In this case, they're saying that she laid hands on Johnson. That's also something that was said here. And so when do you have the right to pull your weapon out and shoot someone? And so this has been a case that has exploded, not just here in Chicago, but beyond, I think because of the way that it happened and who's involved.
And Quadajah was not immediately put in jail.
Correct. Quadajah Holly Johnson was not immediately put in jail. I think it was 2 months or so, maybe 3 months after. And people have been calling for her to be arrested and just asking the question of what happened. This happened on September 8th of 2025. So it did take some time for her to be arrested. And so a lot of people have been asking, why did it take so long? And there was some video from the scene, and the video that we've seen circulated around is the aftermath. And so based on that video alone, people felt like, oh no, she needs to be arrested. And that's where we are with it.
And in the process of that 2 months, before she ended up actually being taken into custody, by the time she got in custody, she was pregnant again.
She was pregnant. According to this, she was pregnant at the time, or at least was aware of a pregnancy at the time of her interaction with Romeca. And so that is an additional level of why, according to her attorney, of why she felt the need to defend herself. I think right now it's going to be really interesting, because if you go through the 20 pages like I did, and I didn't get into every single witness, but the witnesses' statements based on what Quadajah Holly Johnson's attorney has, they are conflicting. If this is all indeed, fact, it is questionable of who saw what and are they sure they saw it? How did they see it? It does matter. I know some people will argue this, but it does matter if you're wearing headphones that are noise canceling and if they're on.
Yeah, sure.
We don't know if they were on.
Yeah.
I guess in some video they do show her wearing these headphones, so we don't know if they were on or not. But even if you have huge bulky headphones on with the cushioning, it does distort what you hear. So looking at her side of things now, being able to see it because we never got to see her side of things, it does bring up a lot of questions.
And it was just such a chaotic scene as
Horrible
well.
scene.
So you can also understand that, a recollection might not be actually that accurate in a chaotic situation too.
Yeah, and I think also what her attorney did here was lay out some clear circumstances of where you have to ask, what are those witnesses going to say when they go on the stand? I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out in trial. We do know she's back in court tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. And again, they are asking for her to be released, saying that she was not a dangerous person beforehand, had no serious criminal history, which we had reported that. We knew that to be true. And so now, what happens?
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see come tomorrow.
Okay, well, we'll catch back up with you. You've been on it from the very beginning, so thank you so much for the update.
No problem.
The case took a sudden and unsettling turn when two new disturbing details began to surface, catching the attention of everyone who had been following closely. What once seemed like a tragic but somewhat understood situation now felt incomplete, as if key pieces had been missing all along. The story surrounding Romeca Meeks-Blackmon was no longer just about what happened that day. It was becoming something deeper, something far more complex than many had initially believed. As these new details started to circulate, reactions were immediate. People revisited earlier reports, trying to connect the dots and understand how this new information fit into the timeline. Conversations grew louder across social media, with some expressing shock, while others urged caution, reminding everyone that early information can sometimes be misleading. Still, the phrase "disturbing details" carried weight, leaving a sense of unease that was hard to ignore. At the center of it all remained Quadajah Johnson, whose situation was already serious before these revelations came to light. Now, with new information emerging, the case seemed to take on an entirely different tone. What had once been viewed through a narrower lens was now expanding, raising questions not just about what happened, but about how much more there was to uncover. People began speculating, trying to interpret what these details could mean. Some believed they would significantly strengthen the case, while others questioned their reliability, emphasizing the importance of verified facts. The uncertainty only added to the tension, making the story even more difficult to fully grasp. What was clear, however, was that the case had entered a new phase. It was no longer just about a single incident, it was about uncovering the full truth, piece by piece. And as you begin to follow this unfolding story, don't forget to like and subscribe, because what comes next will reveal even more about a case that continues to raise serious questions. As the shock from the newly revealed details began to settle, another development quickly pushed the case into an even more serious direction. Authorities announced that 5 additional charges had been added, a move that immediately raised the stakes and signaled that the situation might be far more complex than initially believed. For many following the case of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon, this update changed everything. What once seemed like a tragic but contained incident was now expanding into something much larger. The announcement spread quickly, drawing intense reactions from the public. Some saw the added charges as a sign that investigators had uncovered significant new information, something that justified taking the case further. Others questioned the timing, wondering what exactly had led to this sudden escalation. Regardless of perspective, one thing was clear: the case was no longer in its early stages. It had entered a phase where every decision carried more weight, and every update demanded closer attention. At the center remained Quadajah Johnson, now facing an even more complicated legal situation. Each added charge brought new implications, not just for the case itself, but for how it would be perceived moving forward. The legal process, already intense, was becoming even more layered, with each development adding pressure from both the courtroom and the public. Discussions grew more divided. Some believed the additional charges strengthened the pursuit of justice, while others urged patience, emphasizing that the full context was still unfolding. The gap between public opinion and legal reality became more noticeable, as speculation filled the spaces where confirmed details were still limited. Meanwhile, the focus on Romeca Meeks-Blackmon remained central, reminding everyone that beyond the legal complexity was a real-life impact that couldn't be overlooked. As the case continues to evolve, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because what happens next inside the courtroom will take this story in a direction no one expected. The courtroom quickly became the center of attention as the case reached a critical turning point. With the 2 disturbing details still fresh in people's minds, and the 5 additional charges now officially introduced, there was a growing sense that something major was about to happen. Observers filled the room, while many more followed updates closely, waiting to see how the legal system would respond to these new developments surrounding Quadajah Johnson. Tension was high as both sides prepared to present their positions. The prosecution pushed forward, emphasizing the seriousness of the added charges and suggesting that the new details reinforced their case. On the other side, the defense focused on challenging how those details were being interpreted, raising questions about context, timing, and whether everything being presented truly met the standard required in court. The atmosphere was intense, with every word carrying weight. Then came the moment that shifted everything. The judge delivered a firm decision: no. It was direct, clear, and immediately changed the direction of the case. For a brief moment, the courtroom seemed to pause as people processed what had just been said. The ruling didn't end the case, but it placed a limit on how things could proceed, forcing both sides to reconsider their strategies moving forward. Reactions came quickly. Some saw the decision as a significant setback, while others viewed it as a necessary step to ensure the process remained fair and grounded in proper procedure. Without full clarity on every detail, interpretations varied, and that only added to the complexity of the situation. Throughout it all, the presence of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon remained central, a reminder that beyond legal arguments and courtroom decisions was a story with real consequences. As the case takes this unexpected turn, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because what happens next could completely reshape how this story is understood. The judge's decision didn't slow the story down. It amplified it. Almost immediately, reactions began pouring in from every direction. Legal analysts weighed in, social media erupted with opinions, and those who had been following the case closely found themselves trying to make sense of what the ruling actually meant. The firm no, delivered in court, had done more than redirect the legal process. It had opened the door to even more questions. Some believed the decision was a major turning point, suggesting it limited how the prosecution could move forward with the additional charges. Others argued it was simply part of the legal system doing its job, ensuring that every step followed proper procedures. The divide in interpretation only made the situation more intense, as each side held firmly to its understanding of what had just happened. At the center of it all remained Quadajah Johnson, whose case had now taken on even more complexity. The added charges, combined with the judge's decision, created a situation where every next move mattered more than ever. Legal teams adjusted their strategies, knowing that the path forward had changed, even if the overall case was far from over. Meanwhile, the focus on Romeca Meeks-Blackmon continued to ground the story in its reality. Beyond the debates, beyond the legal arguments, there was a life at the center of it all, a reminder that the case wasn't just about rulings or charges, but about real consequences that could not be undone. Online, discussions grew louder and more emotional. Some called for patience, urging others to wait for more verified information, while others continued to form strong opinions based on what was already known. The gap between public perception and legal reality became even more visible, highlighting how differently the same situation could be viewed depending on perspective. As everything continues to unfold, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because the final chapter will bring all these developments together in a way that leaves more questions than answers. As the case reached this stage, everything felt heavier, more complex, and far from resolved. The two disturbing details, the addition of 5 new charges, and the judge's firm decision had all reshaped the narrative, turning what once seemed like a straightforward case into something layered with uncertainty. For those following closely, it became clear that this story was no longer about isolated updates. It was about how all the pieces connected and what they ultimately meant. At the center remained Quadajah Johnson, now facing a legal situation that had grown more complicated with each development. Every decision moving forward would carry significant weight, not just for the outcome of the case, but for how it would be understood by the public. The pressure surrounding the courtroom continued to build, even as the process itself moved carefully, step by step. At the same time, the presence of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon remained at the heart of everything. Beyond the legal arguments, beyond the speculation and debates, there was a real-life impact that could not be overlooked. For many, that was the most important part of the story, a reminder that behind every headline is a human life and a lasting loss. The public conversation, however, showed no signs of slowing down. Opinions remained divided, with some focusing on the legal process and others reacting to the emotional weight of the case. The gap between what people believed and what could be proven in court continued to shape how the story was perceived. In the end, this case stands as a powerful example of how truth can unfold in layers. What seems clear at one moment can become uncertain the next, and what is believed today may change tomorrow as new information comes to light. And if you've stayed with this story from beginning to end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because stories like this remind us how important it is to look beyond the surface and understand the full picture before drawing conclusions.